As Professor already mentioned, that's me. This is what we are going to talk about: life cycle assessment applied to electrochemical advanced oxidation processes for wastewater treatment. I am really happy to be here. I am really honored to be sharing that with you guys. Thank you so much for all of you who have expressed your interest in this topic. I find it really interesting. I hope you also enjoy this seminar. Professor has already introduced me very well. He has already explained most of everything on my bio. So I'm a PhD in chemical engineering. I earned it earlier this year. The topic of my PhD was precisely the life cycle assessment applied to advanced oxidation in wastewater treatment. I'm a bachelor by training. By education, I'm a bachelor in environmental sciences, but by training, I'm more an environmental engineer. I have done several, I've had touched different disciplines throughout my career, and work as an intern in Bahamas, like Professor mentioned, doing some aquatic ecosystem studies and also sustainability and so on, collaborating in different projects. Then I work in the University of Malaga. Through that, I got the chance to meet a professor. He introduced me to his research, and later on, I could join his team. We work in this very interesting field work, full-scale phytoremediation work in Chicago. It was also part of park restoration. And thanks to Professor, I got to know more about life cycle assessment, which has later become, the main topic in my career. This is what I do now. So after that, I took another master's because I wanted to know more about wastewater treatment, and I didn't have any training in that. So I did my advanced biotechnology with specialization in wastewater treatment. So I could combine the knowledge on microalgae that I acquired in my bachelor background and this internship, and then using microalgae to clean wastewater as a way to contribute to circular economy. And then all this together, all these different disciplines combined together led me to land on this amazing opportunity to do my PhD as a Marie Curie in this project called Innoveox that combined electrochemistry, wastewater treatment, sustainability, and life cycle assessment. And now I work as part of the Plastic Waste Innovation Hub. And the topic of my research has changed a little. It's still life cycle assessment, but now it's focused on plastic waste and how can we develop strategies from a systems perspective to reduce or make more sustainable the use of absorbing hygiene products, nappies, diapers, incontinence, period products, and so on. Those products are necessary. Everybody, society needs them, but it doesn't mean that it needs to keep being a huge problem, a huge source of waste and a problem for the environment. So this is what we do now. So I have divided this seminar into 4 sections following like a logical order. So I'm going to talk about and because of the time constraint and because of the broad audience, I'm not going to get into much detail in some aspects. So if you have questions, you're more than welcome to drop them in the chat or contact me later. Be more than happy to answer if you have some more detailed questions about technical aspects and so on. So basically, I'm going to talk about the background. Why did I do what I did? A bit about the methodology. I will illustrate the study with some case studies that we run through. And then we're going to talk about conclusions and the next steps. So without further ado, not so long ago, European surface waters were found not to be at a very healthy status. They were okay, but they could do better. They weren't doing as good as expected. Main reasons for that, one of the main reasons for that was due to the presence of micropollutants. For those of you who don't know what a micropollutant is, they are mostly organic compounds, many of them substance of concern and emerging organic pollutants that they come from many different sources. They come from personal products like shampoo, body lotions, so on, medicines. They can be produced in different industries. They come from hospitals and so on. There is a very, very wide range of products that enter within this category. They are found in surface waters in very low concentration, hence their name micropollutants. And as I mentioned, because they are substances of concern, they needed to be tracked down, and we need to make an effort to remove them. So tracking them down, it was seen that wastewater treatment plants were responsible for a part of them. So if there was something to put the lens on, it would be conventional wastewater treatment plants. And I'll explain you why. So basically, many of them would end up in drains into the common wastewater stream towards the wastewater treatment plants. Conventional wastewater treatment plants often fail to treat them. So what happens is that they will end up in surface waters, and that will cause damage to the environment and ultimately to human health. So electrochemical advanced oxidation processes, or EAOP, were sought like a way to upgrade this wastewater treatment and to get rid up to some point of these chemicals. It's seen as a technology that would be efficient to break them down and to make them, to treat them through wastewater treatment. The problem is that their large-scale implementation presents limitations because they are still at an early stage of deployment. So their sustainability and their feasibility as a solution needs to be assessed. So for those of you who don't know what advanced oxidation processes or electrochemical advanced oxidation processes are, I'm going to explain you very quickly. Basically, they are a process that would be able to break down organic molecules. How they do that? Well, it's a chemical process that produces highly reactive species that have the ability to oxidize those organic molecules. Mostly the reactive species, the typical one, the most liked one is the hydroxyl radical. Why? Because it's very powerful. It destroys non-selectively. So as long as it's organic or organometallic, it's done, and it reacts very quickly and it creates a chain. I'm not going to get into detail on how to produce them. This is just for you to. This is for illustrate to you that there are many different routes to create those radicals. That you can do it assisted by solar or UV radiation or without. And that typically you might need some reagents to create this chemical process to obtain your radicals. However, electrochemical advanced oxidation processes do the same, but the generation of these oxidative species, but using electron as a clean reagent. So in this case, you wouldn't need to add further reagents, technically. So, and you would work with the setup of an electrolytic cell. There are also different rules and details about that I'm not going to get into. Just for those of you who are interested, you can talk to me later. And as expected, there were like also different routes to produce those radicals, and there are different technologies. So it can be done by electrolytic oxidation, either anodic or anodic cathodic, producing also hydrogen peroxide. There is electrophantom. There are some other photo-assisted processes, and so on. And why are they so interesting? Well, they can operate at ambient conditions. They can potentially operate using renewable energy sources, and they are considered sustainable or cleaner because they wouldn't need further chemical addition, so they could be waste free. What is the main issue with them? Well, they are power source. They need electricity for the whole system to work. So it needs to be upgraded, or it needs to be very well researched so that it could be done in an efficient way, so you can make it like large scale. So that's why, because of the costs associated with that, and because it's a novel technology, the industrial implementation is still limited. So we aim to solve that, to find a solution on how this could be implemented large scale. This could be part of a conventional wastewater treatment. A group of organizations in Europe, a group of organizations like companies and some representatives of the industry and academia joined forces and created this European consortium called Innoveos, that was funded by Horizon 2020. And the aim was to develop electrochemical advanced oxidation processes that could potentially overcome the optical obstacles that have been found so far for them to be implemented large scale. They recruited people to develop different areas of knowledge to join forces as well to get to that. So within a very close collaboration within the industry partners and universities, we would devise strategies to make that happen. So I was part of that. My role was to assess the environmental sustainability and the cost of the implementation. And for that, I used life cycle assessment. And I had to collaborate with different partner organizations. So in the little map, the small icons you see there is where I had to be collaborating with other partners to make that happen as well. So again, for those of you who don't know what life cycle assessment is, I'll explain you briefly. It is a methodology, it's standardized, and it's very, very well known and used worldwide. Very useful because it helps us to understand the environmental impact of any process or product or service. Mimicking the life cycle, like a biology life cycle, any of these processes or products have different life cycle stages. And what it does is to translate what is required, what is happening in that stage into an environmental impact, because it takes into account resources that are needed, energy for transformation of the materials, and so on, and the emissions to the environment. All of that has an implication for the environmental impact, and this is what life cycle assessment allows us to do. And so basically, it has a few steps that you need to follow because, as I mentioned, it's standardized by International Standard Organization. So you have to follow like a recipe, and then it will lead you to get the results that you are looking for. So you have to define what you are going to do, what is going to be the scope of your study, what is going to include. Then you have to recover as much information as you can about the process, everything that you need to know about it that would cause that would have an implication for the environmental impact contribution. You have to have it. You have to talk to companies. You have to know about do your research about the process. You need to know how many materials and energy flows and water and everything you need it. And then you are going to have to assess the impact, interpret it, and also you can communicate to your audience. It will help you to not only have information about the environmental impact contribution of the process, but also you can communicate that to a broader audience. It can help you making decisions, and it can also help you comparing between different processes or products. So in this life cycle inventory, you have an illustration of what I mentioned of the information, the collection the collection of information you need to have. For me, I think this is a very relevant part of the process, and also to being able to obtain and interpret and understand the results, because this is what is going to make the difference between making one decision or another. This is how eventually your results look like. So to create this framework, okay, what would be, how can we assess the sustainability of electrochemical advanced oxidation applied to wastewater treatment that could be implemented at a large scale? I have to ask myself some questions, like, for example, of the technologies that are known and studied, which ones have large scale potential? What limitations have been found for them not to be implemented yet? And regarding life cycle assessment, what has been done so far? Has anybody done any study about this before? So for the first question, I found that electrophoton and electrooxidation and photoelectrocatalytic oxidation were the most popular to have large scale potential. They weren't tried yet, but they would potentially have some opportunity. I also found that ozonation, that is not an electrochemical advanced oxidation process, was very well implemented it has been typically implemented in water treatment for drinking water as a grade to the treatment so that it could be disinfected and it would be safe for consumption. Well, it also works for wastewater treatment, and it has been widely implemented, successfully implemented large scale, and because of this, it is a popular choice, and I used it as a baseline, as a conventional technology to compare to the innovative ones. About the limitations, basically the studies that I found didn't use real wastewater for starters, because they are in a very early stage of deployment. They use synthetic wastewater, and when you use the real one, that is going to have some problems, mass transfer, fouling, and some other issues that we will have to deal with if we wanted this to be a large-scale real thing. And energy consumption was pointed out as one of the bottleneck issues and the associated costs, of course. And then regarding life cycle assessment of these technologies, there weren't many studies when I did this literature review, and very, very few of them, I can say maybe two, were done in a full scale and wasn't for urban wastewater treatment. Most of the studies were done lab scale and were studies under the lens of LCA, but were not very complete. Basically, for ozonation, what I found is that the key environmental impact was electricity consumption during the production of ozone, but those studies didn't have a cost analysis or a scenario analysis attached to it. Scenario analysis are useful because you can say, what if we use this material instead of that one? And so you run your LCA and you would see that's why it helps you comparing and making decisions. That's one of the cool things of LCA. Okay, so most of the studies didn't include that. And when it comes to electrochemical advanced oxidation processes, also energy consumption during the use phase was pointed out as the main environmental impact contributor, but those studies didn't really consider the whole life cycle of the plant and like the construction and end of life, and also didn't have the cost analysis, didn't have toxicity analysis, and most popular technologies were electrophoton and electrooxidation. Okay, so I already had the information for my framework, and this is what I was going to do. I was going to assess the environmental and economic performance of those processes, electrochemical advanced oxidation processes for wastewater treatment, and to study their potential for industrial implementation. I would use life cycle assessment to evaluate their sustainability, and then compare to ozonation. I was going to focus on the technologies that were developed under the Innoveox framework, because that was the point. And because the aim of this consortium was to overcome limitations. So I was going to focus on that. and then compare them to a very well implemented technology, which is ozonation, as the conventional one that was going to be the baseline of the process of the study. Sorry. So, step number one: develop a comprehensive life cycle assessment and life cycle cost of ozonation, large scale implementation. Then apply life cycle assessment and life cycle cost of those emerging technologies developed in Noveox and compare them to ozonation in different scales, not just lab scale, but also scale them up and compare. And then I wanted to go a bit further and see what would happen if these electrochemical advanced oxidation processes in wastewater are not just used to clean the wastewater better, but also would it be useful to recover some resources from the water? So we're going to see. So to illustrate the research framework, I am using 4 different case studies that I carried out. The first one, the ozonation full scale analysis. This was done in collaboration with the company Nijhuis Sour Industries in Netherlands. This was a very interesting case study because I got the chance to analyze using life cycle assessment the first ozonation plant built in the country, and it was going to be the first of many more. So my inputs the outcomes of the study would be useful for them to make better and more sustainable decisions in the future. The second case study, in that one, I did it in collaboration with different organizations as part of the Innoveox consortium. Patras in Greece, University of Patras, University of Delft in Netherlands, K11 in Belgium, and again Nijhuis in Netherlands. I did the life cycle assessment and life cycle cost of those technologies lab scale and compare them to ozonation lab scale. In the case study number 3, one of those technologies in case study number 2 that were developed lab scale were theoretically scaled up and compared to ozonation full scale with the ozonation of case study number 1. And then, hold on, let me try something. Does it work? I think it works, right? If I point out, yeah, that's going to help me a lot because I'm printing out, but I don't think you can see it. So, and then case study number 4 was the assessment of applying advanced oxidation processes in a wastewater resource recovery process using ion exchange. And that was done in collaboration with Inopsys in Belgium, a startup company for wastewater treatment in Belgium. For all of them, I used Gabi as the software, and I used the environmental impact assessment methodology, environmental footprint 3.0. Let's move on to the first case study. This case study has also been already published. So in case you have some interest, I can, or maybe professor can send you the link later. And so in this case study, we took this, the picture shows you this is the first ozonation for wastewater treatment installed in Netherlands. This company did it. It was part of a government call for upgrading wastewater treatment. And so, as I mentioned, it was a pioneering process. And so the outcomes of this study would support decision making. And was set and also for my study, it was set the baseline for further comparison with the electrochemical advanced oxidation processes. Those are the system boundaries. The functional unit was the treatment of an effluent stream of 400 cubic meters per hour for the removal of 70% of micropollutants that were initially present in the wastewater stream. So the effluent would enter the plant pulled by some inlet pumps. On the one hand, we would have the generation of the ozone using liquid oxygen that is provided from the outside, it's not generated in the plant. In order to produce the ozone, we need compressed and dry air that was supplied through PSA. It is attached to a cooling system. So then once the ozone is produced, it's injected into a reactor that receives the water and receives the ozone, and here the reaction of oxidation takes place. The unnecessary ozone gas goes safely into an ozone destructor that has a catalyst that would destroy it, and the catalyst will be replaced and sent to disposal. And then we have the clean effluent. The boundaries of the study were cradle to grave, and that means we will assess all the life cycle stages of the plant from construction to end of life. End of life, that has a name, I forgot. Closure of the plant, let's say. So the study, the central part of the study was the life cycle assessment and cost analysis of the process that was receiving the effluent, produce, oxidize it, have the clean effluent, and so on. But then we also develop a scenario analysis. So for each of the life cycle stages, we would have alternatives. For example, in the construction phase, what would happen if we use recycled or reused materials? How does it affect the environmental impact contribution? In the use phase, what happens if we use green energy? And what happens if instead of providing the liquid oxygen from a company from the outside, we produce it on site? And for the end of life, again, instead of just dispose of the materials once the plant is decommissioned, that was the word I was looking for. What happens if we use some of them? Okay, so we run our analysis on that, and without getting into much detail, we saw that for the analysis of the plant as it was already running, the most important environmental and economic contributor to the impact was ozone generation due to electricity consumption mainly. As you can see, the use phase was the one with the highest, the one that represented the highest burden. And then when it comes to the scenarios, we saw that external oxygen supply was the best solution instead of producing on site. We can achieve a greater reduction of CO2 emissions when green energy is used, as the green energy we studied was wind. So if it was wind power, wind source from the Netherlands powering the plant, it would be great. And then also when we reuse materials, it provided the best outcomes for both the construction and end of life. Those materials are mostly applied to the ozone generation setup instead of like the structure where the ozone generator was built in. Rather than the reactor that was made of concrete, and that was a bit trickier to reuse. Now, moving to the case study number 2, this was the LCA and LCC of those technologies that were developed within Innoveos in the lab scale. So my colleagues each of them were working in their universities and labs developing those innovative electrochemical advanced oxidation processes. And in the meantime, this was me in Netherlands in the lab, also running some experiments with a lab scale ozonator, ozone reactor. So what we did was we put together our knowledge and our results, and with the information they provided, I could run this life cycle assessment to my project, to my reactor and theirs, so then we could have a fair comparison. One of them was using a very low-cost cathode made of polyurethane sponge. So this was a very efficient, low-cost electrochemical cell that he built in Greece. This other colleague was focusing on, she used more like a commercial lab-scale reactor for electrochemical oxidation, but she was focusing on the production of another radical, sulfate, instead of hydroxyl, that was a popular one, and see what happened. Another colleague was developing this electrochemical cell that would use electrophantom, and it would be combined with granular activated carbon. So the carbon and electrophantom would work together. So then you wouldn't need to replace the activated carbon that much. You would make it a more efficient cathode. And the electrophantom was also working great because of the carbon. And then another colleague was developing in Netherlands a reactor that would use it would be solar power. So it would use solar energy to fuel the reactor to create the hydroxyl radical to break down the micropollutants. And me was just ozone, producing ozone. I didn't look at this setup, it was already there. So the processes were very different. Technologies were super different. We used different micropollutants because we were working separately and then we joined forces, right? So to make this comparison was a bit challenging because we used different micropollutants. Our setups were different. We had different volumes of in our reactors, different experimental conditions. But what we had in common was that we all achieved a high rate of degradation. And because of that, I could create a fair comparison. So my functional unit was going to be the removal of 90% of micropollutant, because as you can see, all of our removal efficiencies were around 90%. So that allowed me to make a comparison. This is the system boundaries. Again, the scope is cradle to grave. So all the stages of from raw material extraction, construction of the reactor or assembling in the lab, and then the process of oxidation, and then the end of life, what we would do with the different materials, the disposal of them. And of course, we would analyze the economical implications. So very interestingly, what we found was that those reactors, such as the one of one of my colleague in the commercial one or this one, were technologies that were very well implemented lab scale, that they were very robust, they would last very long, whereas those innovative technologies would last very little. So the shorter the lifespan of the reactor, the higher the environmental impact contribution and the higher the cost. So that's why those promising reactors that were innovative in the sense of how they get their energy or the materials they use are very low cost and sustainable, didn't have such a great outcome. And the ones that were more robust and have a largest lifespan offset them. But none of them could beat ozonation. Lab scale ozonation was the one that did better economically and environmentally. Again, probably because it's a very most robust technology. And so, yeah, lessons learned. So when it comes to scaling them up, we have to pay close attention to the material selection, check whether we can use green energy to supply the system, and also it's very interesting to track degradation compounds. This I haven't spoken about this much, and it was part of the scope of the project, nonetheless. But when it comes to degrading emerging molecules with emerging technologies, you might come up with different degradation pathways that might not be as safe, let's say, as they could. You might end up with a byproduct that it can be even worse than the parent. So this needs to be carefully tracked down. So to bear in mind. For the case study number 3, we came up with one of the studies in the case study number 2, lab scale. Surprisingly, not one of the ones that did better, but the ones that it was the one that with the greatest potential, also reflected in literature. So it was the one that would use solar power to power the whole system and degrade the micropollutant. This was selected, and through computational fluid dynamic with a theoretical model, it was scaled up. And then I provided my knowledge and expertise to do the life cycle assessment and the life cycle cost of it. And we wanted to go a bit further, and we wanted to know what happened if it was implemented real scale, like the ozonation, like this one that was like already an actual reactor working right now to treat the water. So we run so it was scaled up. Some of the results, not some, it was validated by some experiments. So we run the environmental performance analysis, the cost, and then compare to what we obtained firstly in case study number 1. And we were really pleased with the results because in many, this is just a short representation of the outcomes, but in most of the environmental impact categories that we consider, when we compare to ozonation, this photoelectrocatalysis worked way better than ozonation. And we compared our results with those models developed in literature, and it also did better. Our electrochemical advanced oxidation scaled up process works better than the ones that were, available in literature. And the main problem we found when this when this technology was to be implemented large scale was electricity consumption. But surprisingly, not because because we studied it powered by solar energy, but also powered by the grid, because we thought that would be the most sensible first step for implementation. So even if it was powered by the grid, it wasn't the production of the hydroxyl radical and oxidation process. It was the power needed for the peripheral elements like the pumps. It was the one that would make electricity consumption a big burden for this to be implemented large scale. So if it could be perfected for the whole system to be powered by solar energy, that would be great. So of course, when we studied the scenarios, when it was powered by green energy, it was way better. And taking into account the material reuse is always, I don't know if always, but it was a great alternative as well. And moving on to case study number 4, in this case, we were not going to compare to ozonation. The scope was different. We wanted to see what would be the environmental performance of recovering a very valuable resource such as palladium from wastewater using ion exchange combined with advanced oxidation. This project was done in collaboration with Inopsys, the startup company in Belgium, and we wanted to see also what would be the performance with different optimization scenarios compared to incineration. So what has been done so far, so this is how it goes. There is this pharmaceutical company that part of their waste stream is an effluent that contains palladium. And so far, what they did was to collect this wastewater effluent and send it to an incinerator and not recover anything. Inopsys came along and they developed a technology that would be able to recover this palladium from their wastewater using ion exchange. So first of all, we wanted to see whether this alternative was better than just incinerating the wastewater. And the way it would work would be they would collect the effluent from the company and run some pretreatment so that it would be easier for the palladium to be extracted. It would make it more available. Then the extraction process would happen using ion exchange resins. And then once the whole effluent has come through the ion exchange column, you have clean wastewater on the one hand, and then you have your resin with the palladium on the other. You would send that to incineration and recover the palladium downstream. So this is an overview of the process. And then we have the different scenarios. So for you to have an idea, this on the top was is what was happening before. The baseline was taking the wastewater, incinerating them, that's it. But then we came up with the Inopsis strategy, which was first running a pre-treatment, removing total solid, suspended solid, and reducing the pH. Then we will have different optimization scenarios. Scenario A is the one that was actually implemented, the one that they developed firstly. And in this case, you don't have any advanced oxidation process. You just run the water through the column, trap the palladium, and then you have two alternatives. Either you send treated water to incineration, because of course this I mentioned it was a clean effluent, but it wasn't. It had other compounds that need to be get rid of by incineration. So you would send the wastewater without the palladium to an incineration plant. That's it. Or because of the pre-treatment that it has to run, you end up with a wastewater that has not just palladium, but it also has potassium. This water also has potassium, and in this case, you don't recover anything but the palladium. But in this case, you do. So you have your palladium recovered in the resins and potassium in the wastewater. So the alternative was, what happened if we recover that potassium as well, and then we get rid of the water? In scenario B, we run a pre-treatment after this pre-treatment that involves advanced oxidation. So you oxidize the water, and then it would run the palladium extraction, and then either you get rid of the wastewater with the potassium, or you take the potassium and then get rid of the wastewater. And scenario C involves electrochemical advanced oxidation. So the water would go, before extracting the palladium, would go through an electrochemical cell. So by electrochemical oxidation using boron-doped diamond, it would be some of the material would be oxidized, making the palladium more available. And then you have the resin ion exchange treatment, and then either you get rid of the water, or you first recover the potassium and then get rid of the water. Those are the system boundaries. The functional limit of this case study was the treatment of 100 cubic meters of wastewater for the recovering of palladium. And in this case, the system boundaries only included the use phase, let's say. So since the water leaves the company until it is disposed of after recovering. I'm not going to get into much detail or overload you with data analysis, but I just want you to have a look at the graph, at the chart. The first column that says baseline is what was happening before we implemented this treatment. So as you can see, so this would follow logic color coding system, such as red is bad and green it's good. So the greener the better, and the darker the red is the worst. So in this case, baseline scenario had the worst environmental performance. So recovery of palladium, whatever the alternative you would choose, would offset what was being done before. And that is because palladium has a great, not just economic value, but also environmental, it's very environmental, the extraction treatment and so on is very impactful. So if you recover it, it would be great. So A scenarios, AX and AY was the one without advanced oxidation pre-treatment, and the Y implicates that you recover potassium. So it performs better. When you do the advanced oxidation pre-treatment and recover the potassium, it's even better. And if you apply electrochemical advanced oxidation and then recover the potassium, it's great as well. There wasn't like much difference between electrochemical and advanced oxidation when it comes to environmental performance. Advanced oxidation was better than electrochemical, but electrochemical advanced oxidation pretreatment would enhance the process, and so it would be a very great alternative. So recovering palladium was better, even better if you recover potassium, and electrochemical advanced oxidation is something to be taken into account, but of course needs to be backed up with some more experiments. And then Regarding the objectives we had in the beginning, we wanted to see the implementation would be feasible. We wanted to compare the environmental and economic performance with ozonation. We did it in the case study number 1. Electricity consumption was the main impact, and our outcomes were very useful for future implementations. Then we evaluated the sustainability of those emerging technologies within the Innoveox consortium, and we want to see their potential to be implemented in wastewater. We compare them, for that, we compare them to a very well implemented technology, which is ozonation. We did that in case studies number 2, lab scale, and 3, large scale or industrial scale. And we saw that when it comes to lab scale, the impact is dominated by the lifespan and the robustness of the technology. And when you scale it up, that technology that we selected outperformed not just ozonation, but other technologies as well, which make it very interesting to further research on that. And then when we explore the potential of electrochemical advanced oxidation for recovering resources from wastewater, that we did it in case study number 4. We saw that when integrating electrochemical advanced oxidation to the process, it would increase the efficiency and it would report a minor impact despite that there is an increase in the energy consumption. But we also found some limitations, not just all very great outcomes. So, for example, there is a lack of information in the transformation products for toxicity assessment. So it all comes to getting rid of micropollutants. Micropollutants, we don't want them because they can be toxic, they can be harmful to the environment, and they can affect our health. So we should not forget about that. So anything that involves degrading these compounds need to be tracked and needs to be assessed, and especially their toxicity. And sometimes this is not very easy when it comes to integrate toxicity analysis to life cycle assessment. So there must be some agreement on that, and there must be some more work done, because since they are substances that are emerging concern, some of them cannot be included in the life cycle assessment because there is a lack of characterization factors. So we need to expand the understanding of these contaminants and their behavior in water. Another thing that we found a limitation is that those technologies commercial scale that we assessed in case studies number 3 and 4 were theoretical. It is true that in case study number 4, one of them was has been already implemented, but by the time we were doing our life cycle assessment, it was still in a theoretical stage. So it means that we need validation from pilot scale experimental tests, and that is crucial if we want to prove that they actually have a potential to be large scale implemented. Then we have seen in case studies number 1 and 3 that when the alternative was to provide a renewable energy source, it would be great outcomes. But some sources in literature have shown that when you implement renewable energy, green energy, that might affect the performance of your oxidation process. So the effectiveness of green energy needs to be verified and needs to be tested to see that it wouldn't compromise the degradation efficiency. And lastly, the process we studied in palladium recovery in case study number 4 only assessed the operational phase, let's say. So it was lacking a holistic point of view. So it would need to study the potential of electrochemical advanced oxidation applied to resource recovery. We will need to broaden the scope and consider some other, like all the life cycle stages, like we did with the other case studies, and also an economic assessment would be very interesting. And I think that's all from my side. Thank you so much for your attention. If you have questions, you're more than welcome.